What's going on, everybody? Good afternoon. We got more running backs to take a look at here, and now we are down into kind of the bottom layer. We're talking about running backs here who have a place in the NFL, but it's pretty firmly as like a third string running back or even a fourth string running back. Some of these guys will be lucky to be on NFL teams in 2025. They're going to be cheap, they're going to be easy. A lot of these guys feel fairly interchangeable. So understand what you're getting into here. If the Seahawks didn't have Kenny McIntosh, they might need a player like this. As it stands, they do have Kenny McIntosh. I don't think that they need a player like this unless Kubiak really doesn't like McIntosh, I guess. So let's look at this stuff, keeping in mind that we're not necessarily looking because we're personally interested right now, but because we could be in a hypothetical future. So let's go ahead and go in. We're going to go lightning round. Kareem Hunt. This is one of the biggest names here. This is a guy who's actually had a really good career. He was a Pro Bowler as a rookie. He was Offensive Rookie of the Year, almost. I think he actually finished second. He led the league in rushing yards as a rookie, and then his career kind of careened off the cliff. He got into legal trouble, and he found himself as a rotational back on the Browns, and he was still doing pretty good. Still did okay. And last year, he actually found his way back to Kansas City and was a spellback on the Chiefs and did okay, but his best years are clearly behind him. His rookie year is still by a pretty wide margin the best year of his career, and he is approaching 30. He's going to turn 30 before the season starts. Excuse me. So, Kareem Hunt, not a lot left in the tank, but probably enough to still remain in the league. PFF thought he was passable last year, about average, 73.5. That works, right? That's okay. That's something that you can live with. And the year before that, they thought less of him. Still not terrible or anything like that, but 41 out of 58 halfbacks is not going to excite anybody. So at this point, he's a backup that plays in the event of an emergency for the most part, kind of like his role with Kansas City last year. Spotrac says 1 year, $2.6 million. Can't go too wrong with that price. I imagine he'll be worth about that much. So, sure. If we needed it, which we don't, but I imagine somebody will. Maybe Kansas City re-signs this guy so they don't have to make a big investment at the position, which they obviously don't want to do. Last time they tried that, it worked terribly. Next guy, Dare Ogunbowale. Ogunbowale, that would be a fun name to say. Not necessarily a fun player to have. For one, he's about to turn 31, so age is becoming a thing, and he never really was that productive of a player. He actually has more career receiving yards than rushing yards. Not often you see that with a halfback. And he's a third down back, and he's a third down back that has never really found a permanent home. Washington, Tampa, Jacksonville, Houston. These last 3 years he's been on Houston, so that's something, but he doesn't play that much. He's never had more than, 300 yards in a season. He's just kind of a guy that fills out a roster and break glass in case of emergency, right? PFF has been pretty lukewarm on him at best. Last year, 60.6, which for a halfback is pretty bad. Year before that he was maybe the worst graded running back in the league, 46.6. Hard to get worse than that as a running back. So, not particularly notably good as a player. Just kind of out there bobbing around. Spotrac says 1 year, $2.1 million, so it's cheap, but I think you can do better and cheaper at the same time, personally, based on my understanding of Ogunbowale. Khalil Herbert, about to turn 27, so hitting his prime. Not huge miles on this guy. Never had a 1,000-yard season. Never even had an 800-yard season, actually. So not a lot here, but he is somebody who is actually capable of maybe fitting into a rotation. The issue being he's coming off his worst year as a pro. He did basically nothing in 2024. He bounced between the Bears and the Bengals and didn't really do much in either spot. So that's not going to help you get paid. He did have some pretty decent years in 2022. 2023, he was solid both of those years, but as a running back, you can't really survive one really off season when your track record isn't exactly sterling. This is not Nick Chubb making 4 straight Pro Bowls and then having a bad season. This is Khalil Herbert. PFF, not a big fan of his 2024 across 2 teams. Overall grades like a 54, 55. So that's really bad as far as halfbacks go. I think actually it averages out to 52. Now, the year before was pretty good, 78, on a decent sample size of snaps. But again, this is 2 years ago now, and as a running back that doesn't have some elite rep, it's just not going to be good enough to get people's attention, I don't think. So 1 year, $2 million is the price according to Spotrac. I think that's probably fair. But at the same time, last year he was a complete non-factor. He may as well have been anybody. So it's $2 million that you don't have to spend, and it's $2 million you could spend on a player with probably a little more upside. So if I needed a running back, I'd still be looking for a little bit better than Khalil Herbert. Okay, moving on to the next guy. A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon, remember this guy in the draft. He's been on the Packers for the last several years now. Never really became what Green Bay was hoping they were going to get when they spent the 2nd-round pick on him, I think. But he's been fine. He did have a 1,000-yard season in 2021. He's been part of some good offenses. But you can see that Green Bay doesn't trust him to ultimately inherit the role that they were hoping when they drafted him. When they drafted A.J. Dillon, I'm sure they saw him as a future starter. And when Aaron Jones left, they didn't give him the starting job. They gave it to Josh Jacobs, who they signed to a big free agent contract. So they see him as a second down back. They see him as a secondary back. And I guess the thing that kind of stands out is that it seems like his play has diminished with each passing year since his big breakout 2021. 2022, not even 1,000 yards from scrimmage, 4.6 yards a touch. 2023, 840 yards, 4.2 yards a touch. So the production just kind of fell off. And some of that's because of Josh Jacobs, I know, but this tells you that Green Bay is not a big fan of what he's bringing to the table here. So I know that some people are going to say this guy could be a low-end starter, but I'm not really sure I want to bite down too hard on that. Guy's going to turn 27, so that's good, but I don't know. The way Green Bay has treated him makes me wonder. PFF was okay with him last year. 75.7 is decent. And the year before that, they graded him really quite well, 81.4, so they like him. So we can at least say that. But Spotrac is not giving him any real money. 1 year, $2 million. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if he gets a little more than that because he is a little more of a high-profile player. But look at the players that Spotrac is comparing him to. Look at these players that they're drawing comparisons to. Rico Dowdle, James Robinson. Remember, this is Rico before his breakout year in 2024 when he got this contract. So there's a good chance what they're saying here is he's just going to get lost in the wash, and that's a very reasonable position. Now, if I needed a running back, I would probably roll the dice on 1 year, $2 million for Dillon, but something's up. Something's up here beyond what we see with the raw numbers, and I think it's just a matter of Green Bay doesn't really see it with him, and they try to diminish his role with each year. Amir Abdullah, been in the league a while now. I remember when this guy was drafted. I remember when I really liked this guy. And he's had difficulties getting consistent burn in this league and staying healthy. Going to turn 32, so that alone might be a little disqualifying. A guy who's already had some injury issues, but he's done a good job staying healthy in recent seasons, and he's been a fairly effective backup. So was never a 1,000-yard running back, was never even an 800-yard running back, but last year for the Raiders, at 31 years old, he was an effective third down back. He gave you 40 catches, almost 600 yards, 5 touchdowns. It's not bad. He kind of reminds you of the player that Detroit was hoping they would get when they drafted him. Obviously not quite there in terms of volume, but as a guy who comes off the bench, he showed last year he can still do it. The previous 2 years, he barely played, right? He had a grand total of 19 carries and, what is this, like 44 catches in 2 combined years. And then last year, he actually got a chance to spread his wings, and I thought he looked pretty good. So after an extended period of time in the league of not really doing anything, we started to see some sparks. PFF gave him kind of sort of an okay grade last year, still forgettable, 68.3. But there does seem to be some value here in the passing game as a receiver. And the year before that, not that it matters because he barely played, but 55.5 would make him one of the worst graded running backs in the league. And they think he's going to get a little bit of money for his efforts last year, 1.8 million. So, I mean, I don't know if I want to invest anything into a running back at 32 years old that has already struggled to carve out a meaningful role, but look, it's a backup. You're signing him as your third or fourth running back. Break glass in case of emergency. It can't go that wrong. It cannot be that bad. Alexander Madison, longtime backup for the Vikings. I remember a couple years ago when he was filling that role for them. Third round pick. Became a full-time starter basically in 2023. Was not overly impressive. So he kind of found himself cast to the side in 2024, going to the Raiders, having a pretty minimal role, but still grinding out respectability as a backup running back. Generally speaking, a pretty inefficient player. Doesn't really grind up the big yard per carry averages, except for the first 2 years of his career when he was a spellback to it was a Dalvin Cook. So at this point, you're probably just getting one of those grinders, a guys who takes up space. Generally speaking, he does his job. But if you're expecting anything other than replacement level play, you're barking up the wrong tree. PFF was pretty down on him in 2024. 61.4 would be bottom 6 for graded halfbacks. Year before that, basically the same. So he's well below average as a running back, maybe even bad, but he's not terrible. He does belong in the league, but by a pretty thin margin. They think he's going to get 1 year, 1.6 million over on Spotrac. That's probably about right. My issue is just it feels like he's already hit his ceiling, and it's a pretty low ceiling. And I know he's about to turn 27, but I feel like we've seen enough. Kenneth Gainwell, recent Super Bowl champion Kenneth Gainwell, won a Super Bowl with the Eagles last year. Now he's hitting free agency. Never really took off in Philly's offense, never really became a big-time player. I mean, you can see that he just doesn't get a lot of burn. He has a couple seasons where he got over 100 touches, but he is a backup. At best, he's like a third back that rotates in. And his efficiency has also been on the decline the last couple years. Obviously, when the Eagles signed Saquon, that's going to eat into your production. I don't know if it should eat into your efficiency, though. So it's not a great sign for him that he wasn't able to up his efficiency with Saquon on board. PFF was pretty low on him, 56th grade. That's near the bottom of the league for halfbacks. And the year before that, before Saquon, it was even worse, 55.3. That's right at the bottom again. So you're getting a player that belongs in the NFL, but barely, and should probably be held under 100 touches over the course of a season. 1 year, 1.6 million. You get what you pay for. I guess he's young and he doesn't have big miles on him, but you definitely can't go too crazy with your expectations on Kenneth Gainwell. Samaje Perine, the veteran, going to turn 30 in mid-September. He is a pretty workmanlike third down back. Doesn't get the ball a lot on the ground, but he gets the ball a lot through the air. Spent time with this was back when they were the Redskins, Bengals, Dolphins, Broncos, and most recently he tried to farm a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Didn't work out. But he's kind of the purest distillation of a third down back. He barely ever gets carries. He gets screen passes and dump offs and checkdowns. And he's pretty good at that. But as a halfback, he's very forgettable. He's just okay. 67.2 grade last year is workable. Year before that, 71.3. That's okay, but nothing to really pump your fist about. So Samaje Perine, 1 year, 1.5 million. That makes sense for a very siloed player that is starting to get older, going to turn 30 right about the time the season starts. Seems about right to me. Seems reasonable. So that's the first half of your depth running backs. Let me know what you think of this crop. Let me know what you think of the crew. I will see you guys later. We're going to do one more running back video, and then we're going to move on to a new position tomorrow. So let me know what's up. See you guys soon. Go Hawks.